Alright, so the question is, how does our understanding of Lesch-Nyhan syndrome help us to understand biology in a broader sense? And I think the answer to that is twofold. There's the biochemical aspect of it, and there's also the genetic aspect of it. And I think that the biochemical aspect of it is that understanding the loss of the HPRT function helps us to understand what does this enzyme do in our body. This particular biochemical pathway it affects, how does it affect the body as a whole? How does it affect the physiology on a large, broad, grander scale? Obviously, we can go into a laboratory and we can take an enzyme and we can put it in a test tube and figure out exactly what it does. We can say, okay, this enzyme takes molecule A and turns it into molecule B. And in the case of Lesch-Nyhan syndrome, or HPRT enzyme, sorry, it turns molecule A into molecule B, and it also turns molecule alpha into molecule beta. However, this doesn't tell us everything that studying the enzyme in a living being can tell us. Obviously, we can study mutations in yeast, and that's good because that can help us understand the biochemical pathways. But studying in a human being tells us what are the effects in a human being. What are the side effects? We know the initial effects, and also what are the side effects. We have the uric acid overproduction. We have all kinds of things. If you were to study a mutation in a microorganism, it'll probably just excrete the extra uric acid, and it'll have some effect on its survivability, but it won't be as intense as what is in a human being. So, also, the second part of the question, the genetic answer, is understanding different mutations can help us to locate where the gene that mutation affects is located on a chromosome. So for those of you who aren't quite as biologically oriented, in biology we have a term called alleles, which all alleles are different versions of the same gene. So we might have the gene that codes for the HPRT enzyme, and we'll have different versions of that gene. So those different versions of the same gene are called alleles, but it's all considered to be the same gene, and it's in the same location. So by understanding Lesch-Nyhan syndrome and other similar mutations that are less intense, it can help us say, okay, this variation is strongly associated with a variation in a different gene, and by doing that, we can figure out how far away are these two variations on a chromosome. So we can study a family that might have a variation in the HPRT enzyme, and they also have a mutation in gene X. So by studying that variation in gene X and studying that variation in the HPRT enzyme, it can help us say, okay, these two genes are 20 centimorgans away on chromosome X, and so that can help us figure out where are the different genes that we know are located on chromosome X located specifically. And taking that information later on in the future, a lot of this information was put together in the throughout the latter half of the 20th century. Taking that information helped us later on with things like the Human Genome Project, and became a precursor to things like the 1000 Genome Project. And of course, those types of studies are still done today. We want very often to figure out how close together are two genes to each other. And genes that are very close, this can also can tell us some more information, because if you have two genes that are extremely close to one another, then they aren't very often it'll turn out that those two genes have jobs that coincide with each other. So for example, you might have the HPRT mutation, and you might have gene X, and if these are if these are very, very close together, then it's very possible that they operate in the same biochemical pathway. And so that can, or in a similar process that the biology uses. For example, they might both be, two genes that are located very close together might both aid in digestion, or they might both aid in the growth of bone marrow, or they might both be used in skin production, things like this. So I hope that I helped to explain the answer to the question, how does our understanding of Lesch-Nyhan syndrome help us to understand biology in a broader sense? And I know I used a lot of heavy scientific words here that a lot of people who haven't gone to college for biology won't understand, and that's okay. Please feel free to leave me a comment in the comment box if you have any particular questions. And for those of you who have a loved one with Lesch-Nyhan syndrome, my prayers go out to you. Seriously. This is not something I'd wish on anybody, so I hope that may you all be blessed, and this is Greg, out.